Darwin's theory? Why does it attract people? Why people choose to believe in it?
Of course, Darwinian theory is a very comfortable way to see world without presence of God. Remember, it's been not his theory, it's been floating since 17th, 18th century. For some reason, I don't know why, some people say he was Messianian, he was part of that industrial revolution, that I would say elite club that would create new narrative for the future society. I can't tell it to you for sure, but I believe it's every society have its own narrative. Whether it's Soviet society when there is no God, there's only the worker in charge, or American Western society where the cowboy smoking Marlboro and running on his horse towards the sunset. So every society master its own paradigm. So I would say it's not the Darwin, it's the society which would rather easy to accept this paradigm due to their spiritual degradation and lack of spiritual knowledge. So you would say, well, how is it possible that at a certain point the society was very religious and then society lost its belief? Well, when we say religious, it's a spiritual progressive knowledge. Just like a science, true spirituality cannot be stagnant. It has to be very dynamic. So the Aramaic religions were very stagnant with their dogmas. And people would discover the world. They would not be able to live with those dogmas because they were not true and accurate. In Vedic society, thousands of years ago, science and spirituality were one. Islam actually never denies science, considered to be one of the mysterious part of God. However, in Christian society, there was a big contradiction because material science and religion, because basically we can say, and again, we're not trying to offend, Jesus or the saints who were part of that beautiful spiritual experience and they talk about, but as we say, as a church and politicians, the kings or whatever the politicians, create this as a control for humanity. And therefore it lost its own spiritual intrinsic nature. So when the paradigm of the controlling society with democracy, materialism, science becomes stronger than paradigm to control people with religious sentiments, the paradigm has been changed and switched. So that's one answer for your question, but really the answer is different. I just gave you something we would say that would make sense, in a social overview of reality. Now, Darwinian evolution, it's a very great way to understand evolution in general. Why? Because through different forms of species, we can realize that their body has a particular chain. And that chain, it's not physical, it's the conscious chain. Therefore, in Vedas, Srila Sridhar Maharaj give a very deep idea called subjective evolution of consciousness. So if you did this all great work that Darwin did and other scientists collecting all forms of life and really trace there's particular evolution, then the question is what happens over time, what really evolves is the consciousness. So if you put over objective evolution of Darwin, subjective evolution of consciousness, that make a lot of sense, but you have to understand it's Eastern idea and Western idea, so you have to combine two together. That's number one. Number two, the important question which no one really answer in this objective evolution is where the consciousness came from, where is the source of consciousness? Thinking that some physical elements, like you start throwing two stones or make an explosion, will produce your consciousness, it's not a very rational thinking. It's actually, in fact, it's a very primitive idea. But I can give you an example of how this child was born. Male and female parents unite in loving exchange. An outcome of this loving exchange, birth of a child. So consciousness comes from consciousness. That's what Srila Prabhupada was very clearly explaining. So from two human beings, child was born. Now in transhumanistic world, they're saying, well, we can create mother womb in laboratory. We can take father's sperm and inject it. That's been done in Vedas thousands of years ago. That's nothing new for those who understand the Vedic science and the stories. And still, you have to create some physical abode for the child, and you have to have that, element of sperm. That means living being. So, in a particular way, one of my article was the cycle of the soul. We know the water cycle, which we learn in the school, that tells that water is constantly cycled, it's constantly drowning by sun, it's become a cloud, and that's source of life. It comes in with the rain. So in Vedas, what's interesting to describe is the soul travel with water. Because they say, oh, the souls are in the clouds. They're not in that form. But what they say is that subconscious settled plane where the soul exists, at certain point above the earthly, gross earthly plane, and with water, it's coming to earth and producing new life. Because life comes from water. You can't create life out of no water in this world. So it's an interesting way. Some of the scientists, they've studied particular insects in pyramids of Egypt. And those little insects happen to be dead for thousands of years inside pyramids. As they bring them to the water environment, immediately they become, after some time, alive, just feeling. So they were in deep stage of subconscious stage of like a sleep. But once they enter a particular environment, different than desert, they become alive. That really interesting way of telling that their consciousness been dreaming and waiting for a favorable environment for their life to be regained. And again, these are all scientifically proved facts, and we're not talking about the technology or which genome is being used, but all we're just trying to say is consciousness. That's what source of life. If gross materialists, as most people are today, they will deny life as a source of consciousness, but they can't have any other answer but consciousness. Therefore, all the modern psychiatrists and psychologists trying to study the culture, consciousness, and practice, science of consciousness, they still can't identify where's the origin of consciousness. In other words, modern scientists that study consciousness seriously on deeper level, and the way they study the consciousness, they can understand consciousness can be even manipulated, but they still can't find the source. That's what's important. And if you don't able to find the source of something, then you can't really know what it is. You have to understand the source, the seed concept, where it's coming from. And think of this, if I'll take just a little seed of banyan tree, I put some water in some favorable environment, billions of trees will come out of this tree, let's say in 100,000 years. Billions of trees. If each of that seed will attain favorable environment from one seed, I can give you billions of trees. Suppose you planning to go to Mars as in colonial mission, and you're thinking, well, we discovered that we can make a favorable environment, the soil, the water, etc., atmosphere. What should we do? All right, guys, just take a bunch of seeds. Once you have a bunch of seeds, you have the whole thing. And there's another interesting case. I think in Arizona, in desert, in the United States, in 80s, they tried to create an experiment, which in pyramid dome-like structure shape, they built almost like sci-fi space complex, which would be completely cut off from the desert environment, let's say like a Mars, and they would try to recreate the whole life on Earth, which means They brought the plants, they brought the insects, they brought the birds, they brought little animals, and they create the whole kind of like, model of the recreation of life. And guess what? The trees start breaking because wind training the trees and shaking them every day so that winds are very strong. Certain insects eat certain other things, certain birds, animals start dying. It's become ecological disaster. But more than that, this 5 or 6 families, the couples that were supposed to be living like Adam and Eve in this scientific environment, what happened? They become the worst enemy. They still, they're already like retired people. Maybe they don't even alive. They don't still talk to each other. That's how they hate each other. Just being locked up in one environment and, trying to be God. So, it's transhumanistic world. There'll be many beautiful slogans. Oh, we'll just inject you a chip in the brain and you become more productive. Or, with our new device, you can understand your sugar, your heart, and everything. And I would say yes, if the technology can really help, it will. But we can also understand that's also a way to control people. Like once inside your body is something that belongs to me and have clear commercial purpose, that might be a way for you to become my slave. And again, somebody will say, well, people are slaves. They're slaves of their senses. They're slaves. Yeah, but they weren't meant for that. See, if we take theistic spiritual idea that we can say humans are made for self-realizations. If we take somebody else's idea, they say, well, humans are meant for our survival. So we're on top of the food chain. We're the lions. They're the goats. Lions eat goats. Isn't that evolution by Darwin? The survivors of the fittest. So then we can understand that's also self-delusion, because as the higher you can come in hierarchy of humans, you're supposed to be more kind, more compassionate, more giving, more take care of your junior brothers and sister. Rather you think, well, I'm an animal, I'm the lion, I'm the eater. The few of us can only feed on the mountain because we have to eat everybody else. So that's called Darwinian evolution. And evolution of consciousness means as more spiritual you become, as more giving you become. Therefore, greatest spiritual teachers were renunciates. Why do they need money? Why do they need power? If they have wealth of knowledge, if they have wealth of heart, wealth of understanding, compassion to others. Like, do you really think if world would be run by them, there would be like wars right now? No, but world is run by oligarchy, by the people that not only want to overconsume, they think every day how to use technology against you, how to put you in metaverse, how to make you can make a step without Facebook or Instagram, how to see the narratives in YouTube, which YouTube promoting. YouTube is not promoting Socrates and Bhagavad Gita. It promotes your violence, diseases, medical procedures and things. And if you can't understand that, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can help you with. Maybe just listening my little talk, you say, well, this strange person would be, or it might be speaking some interesting things that I should consider. And again, see, you can't really enforce things to people. Remember, when you're a child and you hate porridge and you really want French fries from McDonald's and ice cream at every meal, your mother suddenly started enforcing on your porridge and milk, and you don't really want porridge and milk because the ice cream is the best. But everybody knows what is healthy for you. That's what is the best for you, not as what tasty. So we're living in civilization of false taste, of Snapchat, Instagram, and other things. We've always been pushed for most primitive narration. If you start making the most primitive content, you'll have millions of people watching it. It has to be stupid, superficial, and funny, and then you have millions of viewers. Once you go deeper, like I can't even tell you how many people is going to watch what I tell right now. It may be like 50 people who knows who I am. But that's where we need to learn how to identify the truth and how to select what the truth is. So going carefully through this selection, we can realize things on a deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper level.